Every single day, the average adult produces somewhere between 1 and 2 liters of a liquid that is roughly 95% water, almost entirely sterile, and packed with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in ratios that commercial fertilizer companies have spent decades trying to replicate synthetically. Every single day, that liquid gets flushed into a sewer system. In the United States alone, that is roughly 340 billion liters per year. Gone. Treated as waste. Sent away at significant municipal expense, filtered, processed, and discharged into waterways, while those same households spend an average of $150 to $400 annually on nitrogen-based fertilizers to pour onto the very ground outside their front door. That is not an accident of ignorance. It is a habit so deeply embedded in modern sanitation culture that almost no one stops to ask the obvious question. What if the most complete, most bioavailable, most locally sourced liquid fertilizer on Earth is the one thing every gardener already produces, every morning, before they ever walk outside? 60 days ago, I decided to stop asking the question and start answering it. Walk into any garden center on a Saturday morning in May, and you will see the same thing. Rows of identical blue jugs. Bright labels promising maximum nitrogen. Numbers on the front. October 10th, 10, 20-20-20. That mean almost nothing to the average gardener, but feels scientific enough to trust. The global synthetic fertilizer market generates over $230 billion per year. It is built on a single assumption, that the nutrients plants need cannot come from what we already have, that they must be manufactured, packaged, shipped, and sold. And the average gardener, particularly those of us who have been at this for 20 or 30 years, has absorbed that assumption without ever questioning it. We buy the jug. We follow the label. The plants grow, more or less. And we come back next season and buy another jug. But somewhere underneath that assumption is a fact that agricultural scientists have documented for centuries and that modern research has quantified with uncomfortable precision. The nutrient profile of human urine is not a curiosity. It is a match. The synthetic nitrogen industry pulls in over $100 billion annually in North America and Europe alone. The entire business model rests on one assumption, that biological nitrogen sources are either too unreliable, too unpleasant, or too complicated for household use. Human urine disrupts that cycle at the root, not because it replaces one product with another, but because it is already there, already free, already in a form that soil biology can process within days. There is no commercial incentive to study it seriously. The profit margin of human urine is, by definition, zero. No packaging, no shipping, no retail margin. The research that does exist tends to come from universities in Sweden, the Netherlands, and sub-Saharan Africa, places where the cost of synthetic fertilizer is not abstract, places where the question was never philosophical. It was practical. What they found should have been front-page news in every gardening publication on Earth. Here is a question worth sitting with before another flush of the handle. What, chemically, is urine? The answer that most people carry, the answer absorbed from a lifetime of sanitation culture, is that it is waste, a byproduct, something the body has already processed and discarded. The mental image is of something toxic, something to be removed quickly and thoroughly. That image is almost entirely wrong. Human urine is, in its freshly produced state, a sterile liquid. The kidneys do not excrete pathogens. What they excrete is filtered blood plasma, water carrying the metabolic byproducts of protein breakdown. The primary nitrogen compound in urine is urea, a highly soluble, rapidly bioavailable molecule that soil bacteria convert to ammonium and then nitrate within days of application. It is, functionally, a slow-release nitrogen delivery system that does not require mechanical agitation, no industrial processing, and no synthetic binders to hold it together. Dr. Surendra Shah, a researcher affiliated with the Stockholm Environment Institute, published findings over a decade of field trials documenting the nitrogen content of human urine at approximately 2.5 to 7 grams per liter, comparable, gram for gram, to many commercial liquid fertilizers sold at $18 to $35 per bottle. The phosphorus content averages between 0.2 and 0.8 grams per liter. Potassium runs between 1.5 and 3 grams per liter. The ratios shift slightly with diet and hydration, but the baseline is remarkably consistent across populations. This was not discovered recently. Roman farmers collected urine in clay vessels and carried it to their fields as a matter of routine agricultural practice. The Japanese term yoshodo, literally urine soil method, describes a centuries-old composting approach in which urine was the primary nitrogen activator for farmyard organic matter. The Flemish agricultural manuals of the 17th century, some of the most sophisticated agronomic documents of the pre-industrial era, include detailed instructions for urine collection, dilution, and field application. None of that was folk superstition. It was observed, tested, and passed forward across generations because it worked. What changed was not the chemistry. What changed was the arrival of the Haber-Bosch process in 1913, a method for fixing atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia at industrial scale. Within 2 generations, the ancient ledger was closed. Biological nitrogen sources were reclassified as primitive, and the modern nitrogen industry was born. The chemistry of urine did not change. Only the economics surrounding it did. The question I wanted to answer was not whether urine worked. The research on that was clear enough. The question was whether it worked here, in a real backyard, on real soil, against a commercial nitrogen fertilizer that any gardener could walk into a store and purchase this afternoon. I set up 3 raised beds. Identical dimensions. Identical soil mix. A 60-40 blend of aged compost and native topsoil, prepared the same week from the same sources. Identical planting. 12 tomato transplants per bed, same variety, same nursery, planted the same morning. Bed 1 received diluted human urine at a 1:10 ratio, 1 part urine to 10 parts water, applied once per week at the root zone. Not foliar, not concentrated. 1 weekly application of approximately 500 milliliters per plant. Bed 2 received a commercially available October 10th, 10 synthetic fertilizer, applied at the label recommended rate and schedule. Bed 3 received no additional nitrogen. Water only. This was the control. I documented weekly. Height measurements. Leaf color on a standardized chart. Fruit set timing. Final yield by weight at the end of week 8. The results from the control bed were what you would expect from good compost-heavy soil. Steady, healthy growth, but slower to establish nitrogen availability for the heavy-feeding tomato root system. The synthetic fertilizer bed showed the fastest early surge. Weeks 1 through 3, it was visibly ahead. Leaf color was deep, growth was aggressive, and the plants showed the kind of rapid vertical extension that high-nitrogen synthetic inputs reliably produce. And then, around week 4, something shifted. Dr. Heinz Joseph Braun, agronomist at the University of Hohenheim in Germany, has written extensively on what he calls the synthetic nitrogen plateau, the point at which rapid, soluble nitrogen delivery saturates root uptake capacity and the soil microbial community begins to shift toward bacteria that consume organic matter rather than build it. The plateau is not dramatic. It does not kill plants. It simply stalls them at a ceiling. The urine-fed bed did not plateau. It accelerated. By week 6, the measurements had crossed. By week 8, final harvest, the urine-fed bed had produced an average of 14% more fruit by weight than the synthetic bed and 31% more than the control. Leaf tissue on the urine bed showed consistent mid-green coloration throughout the entire 60 days, never the dark, waxy green of nitrogen excess, never the yellowing of deficiency. The soil in the urine bed also behaved differently. By week 8, the worm count in a standard 30-centimeter core sample was nearly double that of the synthetic bed. The earthworms had moved toward it. They know something the label does not tell you. The difference between a gardener who tries this and gives up and a gardener who makes it a permanent part of their practice comes down entirely to one thing: dilution discipline. Fresh human urine, undiluted, applied directly to soil or plant tissue, will cause nitrogen burn. The concentration of urea is simply too high for direct root contact. This is not a flaw in the input. It is a concentration issue, the same way a bottle of commercial liquid fertilizer applied full strength would cause the same result. The working dilution is 1 part urine to 10 parts water. Not 1 to 5. Not 1 to 8 on a day when you are busy. 10 to 1. At that ratio, the nitrogen concentration drops into the 200 to 700 parts per million range, well within the safe and productive zone for most vegetable crops. The collection is straightforward. A clean, dedicated container, a wide-mouth pitcher or a lidded jar work equally well. Collect first morning urine when possible. It carries the highest nitrogen concentration of the day, produced during the overnight fasting and protein processing period. Dilute immediately before application. Do not store diluted urine for more than 24 hours, as bacterial decomposition begins rapidly and the ammonia odor intensifies. Fresh, diluted, applied within the same day. That is the protocol. Apply directly to the root zone, not on leaves, not on bare stem. 6 to 8 inches away from the main stalk, poured slowly so it penetrates rather than runs off. Once per week for heavy feeders, tomatoes, squash, corn, leafy brassicas. Once every 10 days for moderate feeders, peppers, beans, root vegetables. Do not apply to plants within 4 weeks of harvest if you intend to consume root vegetables or any part that contacts the soil directly. For fruiting crops, tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, squash, Where the edible portion never touches the soil, the buffer period is a single week. Keep a simple log. Date. Which bed? Volume applied. Weather conditions. This is not bureaucracy. It is the only way to know, 6 weeks from now, what you are actually doing. The gardeners who dismiss this method usually skip the log. They cannot tell you what they applied, when, or at what dilution. They are not conducting an experiment. They are guessing, and when the result is ambiguous, they blame the input. The 110 dilution applied weekly is the baseline. But once you understand what the input actually is, the applications expand considerably. The most important advanced use is as a compost activator. Dry carbon materials, straw, shredded cardboard, dried leaves, decompose slowly because they lack the nitrogen that soil bacteria require to break them down rapidly. Urine, applied undiluted to a dry carbon pile, provides exactly that nitrogen burst. It is not a fertilizer application in this context. It is a biological ignition. Carbon to nitrogen ratios that would otherwise require 6 months to decompose reach finished compost in half that time with regular urine application. This was documented in a peer-reviewed study published in the journal Bioresource Technology in 2019 by researchers at Addis Ababa University, who measured decomposition rates in household compost piles with and without urine addition over a 90-day period. The urine-activated piles reached a C/N ratio below 20:1, the accepted threshold for finished compost, in 45 days. The control piles had not reached that threshold by day 90. The second advanced application is seedling establishment. At a stronger dilution, 1 part urine to 20 parts water, applied as a soil drench at the time of transplanting. Urine provides an immediate but gentle nitrogen signal that encourages lateral root development without the surge and crash cycle of soluble synthetic inputs. Think of it as the difference between a strong espresso and a cup of green tea. Both contain caffeine. The physiological trajectory is entirely different. The third application, and the one most relevant for gardeners working with perennial beds, fruit trees, and established shrubs, is seasonal deep feeding. In early spring, before active growth begins, a 1-colonate dilution applied to the drip line of trees and shrubs provides a bioavailable nitrogen pulse timed to when root systems are beginning to stir, but foliage has not yet made demands. Several permaculture practitioners working with established food forests have documented consistent improvement in leaf density and fruit set over 3 to 5 seasons of this practice. Dr. Genevieve Gallo-Lavallee, soil scientist formerly at INRA in France, has noted that the combination of urea nitrogen with naturally occurring trace minerals in urine, including magnesium, calcium, and zinc in small but consistent quantities, may contribute to micronutrient availability in soils that have been long-term recipients of single-element synthetic inputs. The urine does not just feed the plant. It begins to rebuild what the synthetic single-nutrient approach has gradually narrowed. That is a slower benefit. It does not show in 60 days, but it shows. Nearly every gardener who tries this for the first time makes the same error, and it is not what you might expect. The mistake is not using it at all. The mistake is using it inconsistently and then concluding it does not work. Here is what happens. A gardener collects urine, dilutes it, sometimes at the right ratio, sometimes not, applies it twice in the first week because they are enthusiastic, skips the following 2 weeks because life gets busy, then applies it again in week 4 at a stronger dilution because they feel they have fallen behind. By week 6, their plants are uneven. Some are slightly yellow. 1 or 2 are vigorous. The conclusion drawn: urine is unreliable. That is not a conclusion about urine. That is a conclusion about inconsistent application of any nitrogen source. Nitrogen is not a switch. It is a steady signal. Plants build their enzyme systems, their chlorophyll production, their root architecture around the expectation of a consistent nitrogen supply. An inconsistent supply, feast followed by famine followed by feast, produces exactly the uneven results that get blamed on the input. The second mistake is applying it during heat stress. Above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, soil bacterial activity accelerates to the point where even a 110 dilution can create a brief ammonia surge at the root zone as conversion rates outpace plant uptake. Apply in the early morning or evening, never midday in summer. The soil temperature at 6 inches, not the air temperature, is the variable that matters. The third mistake is applying it to stressed plants. A plant that is already wilting from heat, from transplant shock, or from disease pressure does not need nitrogen. It needs water, time, and stability. Adding a nitrogen input to a stressed plant is like handing someone a sandwich during a panic attack. The body cannot process it. Wait until the plant has recovered, is standing upright, and showing active new growth at the growing tips. That is the moment it is ready to use what you give it. That's single discipline, waiting for the right window. is the difference between a failed experiment and a 60-day result that surprises you. What this experiment confirmed was not just that diluted urine works as a fertilizer. That has been confirmed many times, in many places, across many centuries. What it confirmed is something quieter and more important. The resources a garden needs are almost never as far away as the industry would like us to believe. The nitrogen a tomato plant will consume over 60 days of productive fruiting is already in the household. It is already in a form the soil can process. It costs nothing to produce, nothing to transport, and nothing to apply beyond the discipline of a weekly routine and a clean jar. What ties all of this together is a principle that runs through every gardening practice that has ever lasted beyond one generation. The boundary between waste and resource is not fixed. It is a decision, a cultural assumption, a habit so old it feels like biology when in fact it is merely convention. The farmers who carried clay vessels to their fields in ancient Rome were not engaging in a primitive practice. They were observing something that took modern soil science the better part of a century to document with the same precision they had reached through simple, repeated observation. They watched. They measured the results with their eyes and their hands. And they kept doing what worked. Not every transformation is loud. Some of the most powerful ones happen at the root zone, in the early morning, before anyone else is awake. The quiet chemistry of something the body simply released, finding its way back into the ground it came from. If the 60-day results change the way you think about what already belongs in your garden, leave a comment below. I would love to know which of these applications you plan to try first. Share this with a fellow gardener who is spending money every season on nitrogen fertilizer they do not need to buy. And if you want more videos exploring the science behind what is already growing in and around your home, subscribe and stay with us. Until next time, keep your hands in the dirt and your questions honest.